We all know what's going on as we end the week. If you follow news and politics, the system has been clearly flashing red as we have a president lying to the country about an election he lost. On the one hand, kind of an old, tired storyline we've all lived through, and yet with the midterms coming, not one people can just ignore completely. Trump is leaning on his Justice Department to continue these revenge cases, to try to bury all kinds of critics, independent reporters, and others under harassing investigations, subpoenas like we saw new to the New York Times, and outright efforts to jail critics. Then there's the Epstein scandal. Today, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who, of course, is under actual pressure because he still needs Senate votes to turn into the permanent Attorney General. He is, of course, up for that vote anytime. He just had the hearing this week. Well, he's facing heat from Epstein survivors. Remember, up until now, this is an administration that has obviously mishandled the Epstein case in all sorts of ways. Even Trump allies, MAGA podcasters, a lot of different people have said that and observed that. But it wasn't until Blanche actually needed to get the votes for this job he wants that he's now decided to meet with some of those survivors. That's after one Republican senator said they would at least delay, if not spike the confirmation, if he didn't do it. Now, the people in this meeting are characterizing Blanche in this basically session that we know he was dragged to as acting dismissively. They thought the meeting overall was in a sense demoralizing. One accuser speaking on the record, Annie Farmer, saying, quote, after meeting with Blanche, I feel even more confident in urging senators to vote against his confirmation. And again, we are just quoting what some of these people have said on the record. She added that she found him abrasive, condescending, and intentionally non-committal to survivors. Another survivor telling MS Now this.
It was demoralizing, to say the very least. He completely talked around questions. He didn't give transparent answers. He didn't give us any promises as far as following up on investigative leads. He had no real answers for the Ghislaine Maxwell transfer and no real explanation for the improper redactions.
Now, think about that. If there was anyone that you might want to use this meeting to address, it would be these survivors who, everyone agrees, the facts show, have been harmed by some of those redaction mistakes. And, of course, the softball sort of special treatment for Maxwell, who's an actual co-conspirator of Epstein, the only person currently in a federal prison related to the entire Epstein case and sex trafficking scandal. Of course, she got better treatment under Todd Blanche. So if he had a good reason or a good explanation or something to offer them, this would have been the time. According to these survivors, he failed to do that. All of this following the confirmation hearings where Blanche, who comes out of a background of being Trump's personal former criminal lawyer, had to kind of clean up his history, including the obvious conflict of interest that he's too close to the president to be an independent leader of the DOJ if he still thinks of himself as the lawyer, the personal representative of the president. And so one of the things that his job was, at least if he was trying to make that case, make it easier for him to get confirmed, was to try to put some distance, some air, as they say, some daylight between his recent job being Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, when Trump was the first former president to ever need a lawyer to keep him out of prison, by the way, and what his job is now. And even by the lower standards of this era, when he made a kind of a slip, you can decide for yourself if you think it was one of these Freudian slips that was telling or just kind of a flub because he was testifying for a while. But what he said certainly added to the questions and heat on him for just being the president's lawyer, fixer, or hatchet man. Senators also putting Blanche on defense over the now frozen plan to try to give your taxpayer money to MAGA-allied convicts, the claimed IRS immunity for Trump and possibly his family, which also may not be legal, and other important issues. Take a look.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer.
Is the Department of Justice that you're running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive.
You have said that the weaponization fund is a moot issue. Is that your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue. I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund?
Well, they could try to enforce the contract.
Do you personally believe that someone who forcibly entered the U.S. Capitol, assaulted law enforcement, should be rewarded with taxpayer money? Yes or no?
I can't answer it yes or no.
Can't answer a yes or no. A lot of senators, a lot of experts, certainly people who are supportive of police would say, yeah. Answer it no. Duh. Blanche was also asked about these new subpoenas, fresh this week, sent to New York Times journalists. Trump has also threatened now to go back after the broadcast licenses for ABC and NBC. This is over the network's decision, which, of course, in a free society like ours, is their independent press decision over whether or not to give him airtime. And this wasn't exactly an election night speech or a war address. This was a political presentation he wanted to make, and he's mad that they didn't deem it newsworthy enough to bump other programming. So he is retaliating with these threats. Blanche's nomination does hang in the balance. Republican Senator Cornyn reportedly on the fence. A defection could derail the nomination out of the committee, which is now down to a one-vote margin. I enjoy our chance sometimes at the end of the week with a little more time to go into these things. I haven't heard from you yet on what we saw in that nomination hearing and how you view now with this new testimony, Blanche's prospects and qualifications to be AG for good.
I think it's clear, Blanche has testified yesterday, he is Trump's lawyer, tried to correct himself, but that's his mentality. Keep in mind that he just gave a press conference just a couple of weeks ago where what he said to the president was, "I love you, sir." His fealty is totally devoted to the president and not, sadly, to his oath of office, which requires him to pledge to preserve and protect the Constitution. Which is, the time-honored approach of people who have been honored and selected for the position, which he will now sadly fill if confirmed.
Yeah. We think about what has been a decline in the integrity and, frankly, sometimes just the professional quality of appointees for Donald Trump in the second term. Bill Barr was controversial for certain reasons, but I want to just show a comparison of him to Blanche on some of these issues. Take a look.
I repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud. I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
Today, a grand jury sitting in the Eastern District of North Carolina returned an indictment against James Comey on 2 counts.
I love working for President Trump.
I love you, sir.
Do you see a contrast or a decline here?
Oh, extraordinary. Bill Barr, for whatever quarrels people have about some of the decisions he made, he made them on a legal basis, and he was a good counselor to the president, trying to explain to the president where the guardrails were, what the evidence was, what the appropriate response to things were. There are no people in the White House, this White House, who take that road. The reality is they know, as Jay Clayton proved yesterday, that if they say anything that's contrary to the narratives, the false narratives that the president is so attached to, that they'll be fired, as the chief lawyer at the IRS was, in essence, today, because they didn't like the way that he handled that he objected to certain measures that the president and the White House wanted to do with regard to tax audits, likely of the president's enemies.
Yeah. And, you look at some of the back and forth. I wonder what you, as a DOJ veteran, thought of Blanche trying to sort of drape himself in the credibility of these other people, some of whom are resigning in protest or having their careers railroaded over what are, again, not a left or right, not a red-blue thing, but baseless cases floundering in the grand jury, cases tossed by independent judges and Republican appointees. That's context for this exchange. Take a look with White House.
When for the first time in history there's an inquiry into fraud upon the court committed by the Department of Justice, the silence from the department in response to that is deafening, Mr. Blanche. This seems to be the most troubled Department of Justice in history.
The Department of Justice works hard. The prosecutors work hard every day, and I appreciate the hand-picked words that you have behind you right now, but that's not reflective of the 100,000 indictments and informations that have been filed to do the work that I talked about earlier today.
Ty?
So the work that they do is carefully curated by Blanche and his colleagues. They're not allowed to go out and pursue some of the obvious corruption that is rampant in this administration. The president, as we know, made 22,000 stock trades, for in amounts between $750 million and $1.6 billion in the past year. President Obama, by comparison, made 0, and Biden made 13. This is the level of corruption that we're faced with at this stage of the game is shocking. And Blanche was a participant in what is probably the most corrupt act in the history of the Justice Department by a Justice Department official when he tried to facilitate the transfer of $1.8 billion for Trump's own purposes and on his own. After that agreement had been reached, on his own, he added a provision for no consideration, immunizing the Trump family and the president from IRS scrutiny in perpetuity. Right. He is corrupt. He's unqualified. Very, very telling that in the same week that he shows up for his nomination hearing, a federal judge in Florida referred him to the New York bar for disciplinary action because of the fraud that he committed on the court in connection with the slush fund case.